There is a moment in a dismissive avoidance emotional journey where something tiny shifts, something so subtle you could blink and miss it, but so powerful it reveals more truth than any grand gesture ever could. It's the moment when the person who has spent their entire life hiding behind independence suddenly starts showing traces of vulnerability. And these traces come in small, fragile signals that most people don't recognize as love because they don't look like the love we're used to seeing. They look like hesitation. They look like awkwardness. They look like confusion. But underneath all of that, they are the first signs that a dismissive avoidant has let their emotional walls crack open just enough for you to slip inside. For most of their life, a dismissive avoidant has been taught, through experience, trauma, or upbringing, that closeness is unsafe. Not because love is bad, but because love comes with expectations, demands, or loss of self. They learn to survive by depending on themselves and no one else. They learn to equate independence with safety, solitude with control, and emotional distance with peace. So when they begin to develop feelings for you, their system goes into a state it's never prepared for: emotional contradiction. They want you, but wanting you terrifies them. They feel drawn to you, but closeness feels like stepping into a fire they can't control. So the first shift they show is incredibly small, barely noticeable. But it's the truth leaking out from a place they've kept sealed for years. You'll see it in their eyes first. It's a softness, a longer gaze, a moment where their expression isn't guarded. They look at you like they're seeing you differently. Not as someone who threatens their independence, but as someone who brings a feeling they can't suppress. Avoidants don't stare. Avoidants don't linger. They observe from a distance. So when they begin to look at you with a certain depth, pay attention. That's the first crack in their armor. Then you'll notice it in the way they interact. They ask about you, not out of politeness, but because they're genuinely curious. They remember something you said and bring it up later. They attempt conversations they never used to initiate. They lean slightly closer than before, even if for just a second. These gestures won't be smooth. In fact, they'll often be awkward. They may look down after saying something warm, or change the subject quickly when it gets too real. But beneath the awkwardness is something incredibly meaningful they're trying. The dismissive avoidant, who once seemed confident, now has moments of uncertainty around you. They hesitate before responding, not because they don't care, but because they care too much and don't know how to handle it. You'll see a flicker of nervousness in their body language. Maybe they fidget, maybe their voice softens, maybe they take a deep breath before speaking. This nervousness is the clearest sign that you matter to them more than they intended. And then there's the shift in how they treat your presence. Before, being around you was easy for them. They stayed in control. Now, being around you feels different. They become more aware of you. They scan your reactions subtly. They notice your tone. They pay attention to your expressions. They feel your emotional energy more intensely than they ever did before. This heightened awareness is not something a dismissive avoidant feels for just anyone. It only happens when their heart has begun to open without their permission. These small shifts are their love language, because for a dismissive avoidant, vulnerability doesn't come in waves. It comes in drops: a glance, a softer tone, a small act of consideration, a moment where their guard slips, a piece of truth that escapes their lips before they catch it. These details might seem insignificant to someone who doesn't understand their psychology, but for the avoidant, they are monumental. They are the emotional equivalent of someone else writing a love letter or making a heartfelt confession. And this is why recognizing the shift matters so deeply. Because avoidants don't open in obvious ways. They open in micro moments. They won't say, "I love you," early, but they'll show it before they speak it. They won't chase with intensity, but they'll inch closer one tiny step at a time. Most people miss this shift. Most people walk away too soon. Most people mistake subtle vulnerability for disinterest. But if you see this shift, this softening, this awkwardness, this crack in their emotional shield, understand what you're witnessing. You are seeing the earliest, rawest, most honest proof that a dismissive avoidant is falling in love with you. Their walls are not collapsing, they are opening just enough to let you in. When a dismissive avoidant starts acting awkward, pausing mid-sentence, retreating suddenly, or behaving in ways that feel inconsistent, it's easy to assume they're losing interest. Most people misread these signals and walk away right at the moment the avoidant is actually beginning to feel something real. What looks like rejection is often the very first sign their emotional walls are struggling to hold back the feelings they've tried to suppress. And because they never learned how to handle closeness, their body language exposes their heart long before their words ever will. Avoidants are known for being calm, composed, in control, emotionally self-contained. They pride themselves on their ability to stay unbothered, unreadable, untouchable. But when their feelings shift, their mask cracks, and they absolutely hate that. They're not used to feeling nervous in conversation. They're not used to second-guessing what they say. They're not used to being affected by someone else's presence. So when they start falling for you, their emotional system goes into confusion mode. The signals you see on the outside, the hesitations, the sudden quiet, the slight awkwardness, are actually signs of internal chaos. They might pause before replying. Not because they don't care, but because they suddenly care too much. They might avoid eye contact, not because they're disinterested, but because they're afraid their eyes will reveal everything they don't want you to know yet. They might retreat for a day or two, not as a punishment, but as a desperate attempt to calm the storm of emotions swirling inside them. Their silence is never about you. It's about their fear of how much they are starting to feel. And the biggest misconception people have is thinking that when an avoidant pulls back, it means their feelings are fading. The opposite is often true. Avoidants retreat when their feelings are growing faster than they can manage. They step back because the closeness starts to overwhelm their nervous system. Love feels like intensity, and intensity feels like danger. So their retreat is not a goodbye, it's a grounding technique. They need distance not to disconnect from you, but to stabilize themselves enough to stay connected without panicking. You'll notice their awkwardness in the moments that should feel comfortable. A compliment they used to brush off now lands differently. A simple touch sends them into a quiet freeze. Your presence makes them breathe differently, shallower, slower, almost as if their body is adapting to a new emotional temperature. They stumble over words, change topics abruptly, or laugh nervously at things that aren't even funny. These reactions are not accidental. They are the emotional indicators that their avoidance strategy is failing, and failing because of you. They also become more self-conscious around you. They think before they speak. They watch your reactions closely. They become sensitive to your mood in ways they never were before. Their emotional radar sharpens because they care about how you see them now. And caring threatens the independence they've used as armor their entire life. So they move in and out like waves. One moment closer, the next moment withdrawn. Not because they're unstable, but because they're trying to balance fear and desire at the same time. If you look closely, you'll also notice how their defenses shift. The avoidant who once seemed uninterested now becomes unexpectedly attentive. The avoidant who brushed off emotional topics starts asking deeper questions. The avoidant who was always busy suddenly finds time. These contradictions create a confusing mix of warmth and distance, reassurance and retreat. But this contradiction is the language of a dismissive avoidant falling in love. Their awkwardness is not disconnection, it's overwhelm. Their pauses are not distance, they're processing. Their retreat is not rejection, it's regulation. A dismissive avoidant doesn't open up with smooth emotional transitions. They open in glitches, stumbles, pauses, and small cracks of vulnerability they quickly try to hide. They're terrified of giving you the power to hurt them, and even more terrified of how much they already feel for you. So when you see these shifts, awkwardness, hesitation, retreat, don't misinterpret them as a lack of interest. These are the exact signs that something is waking up inside them, something they never expected, something they can't control, something that scares them, excites them, and pulls them toward you all at once. This is not the moment to walk away. This is not the moment to doubt yourself. This is the moment you're witnessing the fragile, trembling beginning of a dismissive avoidant letting themselves care for you in the only way they know how. There is a heartbreaking pattern that shows up again and again with dismissive avoidance. People walk away right before the avoidant finally opens up. Not because the avoidant didn't care, not because the love wasn't there, but because the signs of their love are so subtle, so gentle, so easily overlooked that most people don't even recognize they were standing in front of an emotional breakthrough. That's why understanding their micro, love signals is not just helpful. It's essential. Because if you mistake these signs for indifference, you'll pull away at the exact moment they're trying to come closer, and both of you will end up feeling abandoned in different ways. Dismissive avoidants communicate love like someone learning a foreign language for the first time. Their gestures are small because vulnerability feels enormous. Their tone softens, but their words stay cautious. Their eyes open, but their posture stays guarded. Everything in them is quietly saying, "I'm beginning to trust you." But because they've never said it in words, people miss it. They aren't trying to hide. They simply don't know how to express love without fear. The first micro signal you'll notice is their attentiveness. They start remembering things you said weeks ago, even small details. They show up in little ways that weren't there before, offering to help, checking on you, sending a message that seems casual but is actually loaded with concern. These gestures may seem simple, but for a dismissive avoidant, remembering your favorite drink or texting, "Did you get home safe?" is huge. It means they've allowed your well-being to matter in their inner world. The next signal is their consistency, not dramatic consistency, but small, steady moments. They reply more thoughtfully. They initiate conversations with careful intention. They try to maintain the connection without making it obvious. Avoidants fear being needy, so their consistency comes in mild doses, but if you're paying attention, you'll see the shift. Where they once disappeared for days, now they return sooner. Where they once kept everything short, now they add extra words. These are their first steps toward emotional closeness. Then there's the physical softening. Their eyes hold yours longer. Their shoulders relax when you walk into the room. They angle their body toward you without even thinking about it. For someone who protects their personal space fiercely, this is an enormous sign of trust. When an avoidant allows their physical boundaries to relax around you, it means your presence feels safe to them, and that safety is something they rarely experience. Another micro signal is emotional transparency, not full transparency, but cracks in the surface. They may accidentally reveal something personal about their day. They may admit to feeling stressed, tired, unsure. This may seem small, but for a dismissive avoidant, sharing any real emotion is a sign they're trying to include you in their internal world. It's their way of saying, "I'm letting you see a side of me I hide from everyone." One of the clearest micro signals is their discomfort. Yes, discomfort. When a dismissive avoidant cares, they get awkward, fidgety, quiet, or restless around you. They lose the smooth composure they use with everyone else. You'll ask a simple question and they'll stumble over their answer, not because they don't care, but because they care too much and worry about saying the wrong thing. Their discomfort is not rejection, it's emotional overload. And perhaps the most important micro signal is their effort to stay connected through neutral conversation. They won't say, "I love you." They won't confess their fears, but they'll send you a meme. They'll ask about your day. They'll mention something that reminded them of you. These tiny threads are their way of keeping the emotional cord alive without overwhelming themselves. For them, these little gestures are the confession. When you understand these micro love signals, you'll stop assuming the worst every time they retreat slightly. You'll stop misreading their hesitation as disinterest. You'll stop believing their quietness means they don't care. Instead, you'll see the truth. Dismissive avoidants love in whispers, not shouts. They reveal themselves in tiny openings, not dramatic declarations. And when you can recognize these subtle shifts, you no longer walk away out of frustration. You no longer sabotage the connection. You no longer miss the very moment they're trying to step toward you. Because now you understand that their love doesn't come when the world is watching. It comes in the smallest, most fragile moments that almost no one recognizes. And if you can see those signals, you'll know exactly when their heart is finally choosing you. Even if their words haven't caught up yet. There is something happening inside a dismissive avoidant long before they ever show it on the outside. And it's this hidden internal shift that explains everything. Why they pull closer 1 minute, retreat the next, soften unexpectedly, and then act confused about their own feelings. Most people never see this inner world, so they misinterpret everything. They think the avoidant is cold, uninterested, or detached. But what they don't know is this: when a dismissive avoidant starts to soften around you, their nervous system is entering a state that feels both terrifying and magnetic at the same time. And that internal war is the clearest sign that love is growing beneath the surface. Dismissive avoidants don't process emotions the way others do. Their nervous system is wired to believe that closeness equals danger. Not because they don't want love, but because they learned early in life that needing someone is a path to disappointment. So their entire emotional system is built like an alarm. Every time they feel attachment forming, the alarm goes off inside them. When you see them softening, what you're actually witnessing is the moment the alarm starts malfunctioning. Their fear and their desire collide. Inside their nervous system, two opposing forces are battling. One force tells them to stay safe, stay distant, stay in control. The other force pulls them toward you, toward closeness, comfort, warmth, connection. And when those forces collide, their whole internal system becomes unstable. That instability shows up in the smallest ways. On the outside, their tone becomes gentler, their eyes linger longer, their replies become more thoughtful. Their presence becomes more attentive even if they're trying to hide it. These small behavioral changes come straight from their nervous system shifting into a state it has no map for. Most people think avoidants retreat because they don't care. The truth is much deeper. They retreat because their nervous system is overwhelmed by how much they do care. Their mind tells them to relax, but their body reacts like it's under emotional threat. So when they soften around you, it means their emotional system is trying to adjust to the reality that you feel safe, safer than anyone before. That's why they become quieter, more observant, and sometimes even more clumsy with their words. Their nervous system is recalibrating. You might notice them breathing differently, glancing at you and looking away quickly, becoming more aware of your presence than they should be. All these signs come from one thing: their body is no longer shutting down around you. And for a dismissive avoidant, that is massive. Their entire defense system was created to prevent this exact softening, but here they are feeling it anyway. This shift also triggers fear, not fear of you, but fear of themselves. They don't trust their own vulnerability because they've never learned how to hold it safely. So when they soften, their nervous system sends mixed signals: move closer and pull away at the same time. That's why their behavior looks inconsistent. It's not inconsistency, it's internal conflict. Their softening is the moment their nervous system stops categorizing you as a threat and starts categorizing you as a source of comfort. And the moment that happens, everything changes. They begin noticing your absence more. They become more sensitive to your tone. They feel the emotional distance between you like a physical ache. They respond faster. They show unexpected patience. They pay attention to what you say, not because they're trying to impress you, but because your emotions suddenly matter to them on a level they didn't expect. Inside them, this shift feels like an earthquake. They're not used to emotional safety. They don't know how to hold tenderness. They don't know how to stay soft without fearing loss. That's why their softening is slow, hesitant, fragile. It's a process, not a moment. It comes with stumbles, pauses, retreats, and sudden bursts of closeness that they quickly pull back from because they feel exposed. But make no mistake, this softening is the clearest, strongest, most genuine sign that you are touching a part of them they don't show anyone else. Their nervous system is telling them something their brain cannot phrase into words. This person is safe. This person matters. This person feels different. And once this softening begins, even if they retreat temporarily, their system can never go fully back to the emotional distance they once had. Something has opened. Something has awakened. Something is shifting on a level they can't deny. What you're witnessing is not confusion, not hesitation, not indifference. It is the first sign of a dismissive avoidant falling in love with you from the inside out. There is a moment in every almost relationship with a dismissive avoidant where the connection is on the edge of transforming into something real. And yet, this is the moment most people accidentally ruin everything. Not because they meant to, not because they did something wrong, but because they misread the avoidant's behavior and respond in a way that instantly shuts their heart back down. And the tragedy is that this usually happens right when the avoidant was finally starting to open, finally beginning to trust, finally allowing themselves to lean toward you. The mistake is simple but deadly. People push when the avoidant is softening instead of staying steady. The key misunderstanding comes from how avoidants express love. Most people are used to affection coming with clarity, clear words, consistent reassurance, openly expressed interest. But dismissive avoidants don't show love like that. They show it in micro doses, tiny shifts, subtle efforts. And when those softening moments appear, people think the avoidant is finally ready. So they increase pressure without realizing that pressure terrifies someone who is only taking their first steps toward vulnerability. This is the mistake that shuts them down, asking for emotional clarity too soon, demanding reassurance, pushing the connection forward before their nervous system is ready. What was once a gentle softening becomes a threat again, and they retreat instantly. Not because they don't care, but because they're overwhelmed by the speed of emotional closeness. They were opening slowly, carefully, 1 inch at a time. But when they feel pushed, they run not out of rejection, but out of self-protection. This mistake also shows up in the way people interpret the avoidant's small retreats. When an avoidant softens, they almost always follow that moment with a temporary pullback. It's natural for them. Their system needs to breathe, but most people misinterpret that pullback as disinterest or rejection, and they react from fear. They chase, they confront, they question. They become anxious. They need reassurance. All of this makes the avoidant feel emotionally cornered, and the retreat turns into full withdrawal. The avoidant didn't leave because the feelings weren't real. They left because they felt overwhelmed by the expectation placed on their vulnerability. Another version of this mistake appears when people overreact to the avoidant's inconsistency. Avoidants don't open in a straight line. They move forward, then back, then forward again. It's not games. It's how they regulate fear. But if someone criticizes them, shames them, calls them out for being distant, or demands emotional performance, the avoidant hears only one message: you're not safe here. And the moment they feel unsafe, their heart closes, no matter how deep their feelings were. There's also the mistake of interpreting their softening as permission to overshare emotionally. When an avoidant opens, they do not yet have the emotional capacity to hold someone else's pain, trauma, or unmet needs. If the other person confesses everything at once, the avoidant shuts down, not because they don't care, but because they feel emotionally inadequate. They don't know how to handle vulnerability, including yours. And the biggest mistake of all is assuming that an avoidant expresses love the way normal people do. When someone sees the avoidant's subtle efforts and treats them as insignificant, the avoidant feels unseen. They think, even when I try, it's not enough. This activates shame, and shame makes avoidants retreat deeper into themselves. What was a moment of emotional courage becomes a wound. The secret truth is this: an avoidant becomes closest to the person who can read their subtle signals without demanding bigger ones. They trust the person who doesn't rush the connection. They open to the person who lets their heart unfold on its own pace without force. They reveal themselves to the one who notices the small shifts and treats them like the beginning of something meaningful, instead of pushing for more. Most people never realize how delicate these early stages are. They walk away thinking the avoidant didn't care, when in reality, the avoidant cared deeply. But their heart wasn't ready for the weight of someone else's expectations. If you avoid this mistake, if you stay steady instead of pushing, you'll witness a transformation that only a few ever get to see. Because once a dismissive avoidant feels safe in your steadiness, they won't just soften, they will slowly, quietly, unexpectedly begin to love you with a depth they never gave anyone else. When a dismissive avoidant finally starts to show that tiny shift, the softness, the hesitation, the unexpected warmth, what you do next determines everything. This is the moment most people either create emotional safety or accidentally trigger the avoidant back into their shell. They don't need big reactions. They don't need heavy conversations. They don't need pressure, clarity, demands, or emotional intensity. What they need is calm, grounded, patient energy that tells their nervous system, you are safe here. You can open at your own pace. The way you respond to this shift is the difference between a relationship that deepens and one that collapses under the weight of fear. Avoidants don't fall for the person who tries the hardest to win their love. They fall for the person who doesn't make their love feel like a performance. They fall for the one who isn't shaken when they retreat for a moment. They fall for the one who can hold steady energy even when their own is inconsistent. This steadiness is not passive, it's powerful. It's the emotional environment their nervous system has been craving without knowing how to ask for it. When you respond smoothly to their small openings, without grabbing, without pushing, without leaning too far in, they feel something they rarely feel in connection: relief. Most people misunderstand this stage and think they need to match the avoidant softening by pouring out affection, or trying to define the relationship, or expressing their fear of losing the connection. But for a dismissive avoidant, intensity at this moment feels like emotional pressure, and pressure reminds them of the very thing they're trying to escape. They're not afraid of you, they're afraid of losing themselves. So the more calmly you respond, the safer they feel to keep opening. This is why emotional neutrality is so powerful. Not coldness, not indifference, but emotional regulation. When they text you with a bit more warmth, respond kindly but not excessively. When they look at you with tenderness, smile but don't make it a dramatic moment. When they initiate a small conversation, engage gently without turning it into a deep talk immediately. Their nervous system needs small, manageable steps. They need to feel like they can retreat without punishment and lean in without pressure. They need to sense that the connection is solid but not suffocating. Another crucial element is not over-interpreting their behavior. When someone reacts too intensely, what does this mean? Are we getting closer? Are you falling for me? The avoidant's nervous system panics. They don't want to be analyzed, they want to be accepted. They don't want their small emotional efforts to be treated as big milestones they must now maintain. They want room to breathe. They want space to feel their way into closeness. Responding calmly shows them that their emotional pace is respected. Even the way you handle their mini retreats matters. Instead of confronting or questioning them, you hold your center. You don't chase. You don't demand. You don't anxiously overfunction. You let them stabilize without losing the connection. This stability is powerful. It communicates emotional maturity. And emotional maturity is the one thing that makes a dismissive avoidant feel profoundly safe. They've spent their life around people who took their walls personally. People who interpreted distance as rejection. People who tried to force closeness before the avoidant was ready. When you don't do that, when you become the first person who lets their walls come down without fear, your presence becomes a sanctuary. They can feel it. Their body relaxes around you in ways it doesn't with others. Their voice softens, their guard lowers. They stop scanning the environment for emotional threats because your energy tells them there aren't any. And slowly, something extraordinary happens. They begin to trust you more than they trust their own avoidance. They begin to associate you with emotional safety rather than emotional burden. They begin to feel closeness not as a loss of self, but as something warm, grounding, and peaceful. This shift is rare, precious, and incredibly fragile at first, but when nurtured correctly, it deepens into a kind of love that is loyal, steady, and deeply rooted. Your calm response doesn't just make them feel safe, it rewires their entire experience of attachment. It shows them that love doesn't have to be chaotic, overwhelming, or suffocating. It can be slow, gentle, and real, and for a dismissive avoidant, that kind of love is irresistible, because it finally gives them permission to love you back without fear.